For those that don't know me, I'm Shelby. Nice to meet you. I've been in HR for over 20 years, building and scaling tech companies. And for the last 6 years or so have been as an advisor, serving as an advisor to startups. And so working with lots and lots of startups at any given time. And this topic that we're going to be diving into today is very a hot topic amongst my clients and amongst my community. Um, I'm joined by Jeet, the co-founder and CEO of Kinfolk, who is also spending hours and hours of his day talking to people, leaders around the world, um, figuring out how do we use AI to our advantage. So, you know, as we frame today's conversation, something that Jeet and I have, spent a lot of time thinking about is we've observed that AI is not just driving a productivity conversation or a tooling conversation. It's forcing a conversation about how we work, kind of stepping back and looking at the bigger picture. When we specifically think about operations and employee questions, throughout my entire career, it's been this, tough nut to crack. We've traditionally split out employee questions to like, is it an HR issue? Is it a payroll issue? Is it an IT issue? And treated, these HR issues or IT issues as separate departments, separate workflows, separate budgets. And something that we wanted to dig into today is, how do we look more holistically at this problem of solving employee needs? And we're not necessarily saying that IT should report into HR or vice versa, but we really want to talk about, finding a structure that works for each of your organizations and allows each company to deliver the best employee experience. So that's kind of our focus and where our mindset is today. I also thought it would be useful to share a little bit about who's in the room, because we asked you to share some things about yourself and your company when you signed up for today's chat. And I was, interested to see that over 70% of you are in director level or higher roles, which means that you are likely driving a lot of these decisions and change within your organization. So hoping for you to walk away with some useful nuggets. And then it was also really interesting to see kind of what was top of mind for you. So we used some AI to analyze your responses, and what bubbled up were that the large majority of you say that, getting people on board is the hardest part. It's not necessarily the tool, it's not necessarily the training, it's getting past like resistance and fear and just inertia. People, human nature is to stick with what we know, what's comfortable. And so I really feel for you and empathize that that's the biggest hurdle you're experiencing. 22% of you flagged security and data privacy issues and concerns. A lot of you are working under strict AI policies or in regulated industries, which makes it hard to get this kind of work done and move fast, even if you want to. So even if you aren't dealing with internal resistance, maybe you have like external factors that you're dealing with. And then 18% of you say that you don't know where to start. There's too many tools, there's too many options, not enough clarity on what's actually worth doing. So we hope to cover all of that today. I want to share that we will be addressing questions as they come up as we can. I will be monitoring the Q&A, not the chat. So if you have questions, throw them into the Q&A and I will get to them either in the moment or at the end. And then Jeet and I can always follow up with individuals that we didn't get a chance to cover your questions. Okay, wonderful. So let's dive in. I want to talk about like what starts to break when we scale. So for most of my career, like I mentioned, my background is kind of the 100 to 1,000 scaling motion. That's kind of the growth period I know best. And we had limited options. We would use, ticketing systems that were not necessarily designed for HR. It was usually like a Jira or something like that that the IT team used, or chatbots to address employee questions. Um, and it just never felt great to me. So I'm curious, Jeet, for your perspective, and if you also just want to just share like a little bit about you before you dive into the question. Um, like, what do you think that these traditional ticketing systems solve, and what starts to break as organizations scale?
Yeah, um, really interesting question. And yeah, hey everybody, good to see everybody here. I see the number ticking up as more and more folks join. So as Shelby mentioned, I'm Jeet, and we're building out Kinfolk, which is an AI service desk with the primary function of HR in mind, because there really isn't anything in place, and we didn't set out to be like, hey, we're going to build a service desk. It was more like, how do we help people do work? By removing the friction that they face every day, and how do we help them do their best work? And that meant removing that operational friction. And now with AI agents, it becomes much easier. And we didn't really want to create a world where, oh, well, in order to get access to what you need, you got to create a ticket and then you have to wait. So now with the new technology, we're able to fulfill that. So it feels like everything is a conversation. But with the data you then have in the back end, exactly what people are asking, and therefore you can then improve the processes and the policies. So this is a topic that's really close to my heart. Um, and what we kind of started to see with so many HR leaders and directors and VPs and CPOs that we've spoken with is so far we've had to keep HR and IT separate, not because we wanted to, but because A, there's been so much to do, but then also, frankly, because of like budgetary concerns and historical structural concerns. And it meant that actually we didn't have a view as a whole of how the employee sees us. When an employee comes to ask a question or get some support, they're not thinking about HR or IT. They're just thinking, hey, I need some help. Um, and that intention was already there, but there was no real way of working more collaboratively with different teams. So what that meant was, okay, I guess we'll just use a solution that IT has for HR, which wasn't quite fit for purpose. And it doesn't quite have the same level of interaction. It doesn't give you the data. It may not protect privacy. And because of the user experience, which is built more for ticketing, it's not really built for solving problems in the moment. It meant that, again, the experience wasn't so good, and it didn't achieve the outcome of actually unblocking someone in the moment. And that just came historically from the way that the departments were functioned and who has which budget. And invariably, we ended up using those tools because it was primarily a tooling conversation, and therefore it's an IT decision. Whereas now, what's really interesting is in the age of AI, it is a workforce conversation. It is not no longer just a tooling conversation. So it feels like we're at a really exciting time now where actually we can start to break down some of those silos and have a much more joined up conversation and figure out what that looks for us moving forward.
Yeah, that really resonates because when you think about what the employee wants, they don't really care. Like they don't care, is this an HR thing? Is this the payroll thing? They just want their problem solved.
Yeah.
And so it was always a real pain point. Like it just like hurt my soul when we were like switching Jira ticketing agents or, like just hot potatoing their issue around, and not just, getting our stuff done behind the scenes and solving things seamlessly for employees. I'd love to switch to kind of what you're seeing, like the future look like, or when you're starting to see what are you seeing when you're starting to see companies get this right? I've heard you talk about the term workforce operations, like as a new term to describe this solution. Even going as far as talking about, the idea of a chief work officer or like a
Mm.
new defining of a title. And maybe we're not ready to go that far yet, but I'm curious if you can elaborate on like when you're seeing this work, what does that look like?
Yeah, and this has been really down to the teams and the customers that we partner with. There's been a natural shift, it seems like, where for those specific organizations, HR is having to think a lot more broadly, and that is coming to the surface because of the way that AI is impacting work. And they are openly breaking down those silos. Like, let's say, for example, we're talking about onboarding someone or offboarding someone. Previously, what has tended to happen is that there's this kind of like cultural onboarding, and then there's this productivity onboarding. And that then means once it's for some reason with HR and once it's for some reason with IT. And then we've heard some folks say, well, actually, this is really an IT thing, but it's come over to us because it's onboarding and therefore it's HR. And what we're starting to see is that those forward-thinking organizations are, some are taking it to the nth degree, where IT is starting to report into the HR team. Some are even, we've got a couple of folks, they have changed their title from chief people officer to chief work officer to think more broadly about how do we allow people to do better and higher quality work by unblocking them. And the only way to do that is to look at things holistically. And that means having one department with HR, IT, payroll, and some other functions. But that only works in some scenarios. The workforce operations terminology is something that we've heard come up, but it is not necessarily something that everyone needs to go to. It's more of a frame of thinking so that we can break down those silos. And as long as it's more collaborative and as long as there's that open conversation between HR, IT, payroll, workplace, then that works. I kind of think almost as like if you imagine a product team, the designer and the engineer doesn't report into the product manager necessarily, or the other way around, but they all cohesively work together in order to deliver on the customer outcome. And it seems like a lot of HR teams now that are being successful are bringing that product mindset into the work that they do, and they're thinking more deeply about what is the employee, their internal customer journey. How can we improve that, and how can we work together to design that experience and then deliver on that as engineers, as designers, as product managers of that particular experience.
Yes, because you said, I think you said, did you say HR reporting into IT?
IT reporting into HR. Yeah.
Okay. I was like,
Yeah.
which did you go with? And but either way, I was sort of like, because and I'm sure some of the other people leaders on the call, had a feeling when you said that. You know, I'm curious like where you think the line is. Like I could see this kind of scope creep thing happening where someone might say, like, yes, IT should report into HR, but there's a bunch of IT things that are very technical and very like that maybe just like are better served somewhere else or like staying within their swim lane. Do you have any like a point of view or any guidance for those listening on like where you draw the line?
Yeah, this is a really interesting question and one that I've actually changed my mind on a little bit. Initially, I was like, hey, actually, does any HR leader want to worry about shipping laptops? Um, is that really something that should be something that to think about? And speaking with other HR teams and HR leaders, some have raised their hands up and said, yes, I do want to worry about that because my intention and my goal is to get this person in seat and ramp them up as quickly as possible and make them effective and also motivated and happy to be here. And if they are not getting their laptop on time to be able to do the things that I need them to do, that is a people and productivity problem. And therefore, why shouldn't it be something that I can look at or work more closely on? And if that's the case, then I do need to have a better relationship with IT. So it kind of depends on your existing structure and how far we want to be able to pull it across. But yeah, initially I was like, actually, yeah, that is an IT thing. But the more and more HR leaders I speak with, they're like, well, if we look at the end outcome, what are we trying to achieve? If that's the case, then maybe it is our something that we got to think about. And that's when you get people operations teams who are system thinkers and they're looking at the data and looking at the process and they're trying to evolve that up. And then they're supporting the others who are trying to get people effective and scaled up, such as your people business partners. And interestingly, what we're seeing is that people operations team that are taking more ownership and their customers are actually the rest of the HR team and being that bridge between the HR team and the IT team. And you might have a people tech systems person also helping out and the people analytics person. Is that kind of structure or someone doing those roles that we're seeing be quite successful. where you have that collaboration and shared responsibility.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is there's no like perfect org chart
Yeah,
design. Every company is different. But to kind of lean into like what are we trying to achieve? I know like I've had really good relationships with IT and I've had more adversarial relationships with IT. And so I guess the message for everyone here today is like depending on the health of your relationship with that department, like lean into it and try to, be collaborative and try to like anchor around the common goal that you're
totally.
trying to achieve. Easier said than done, but
Totally.
okay, cool. All right. So let's see. I'd love to talk about a little bit more about like where you see AI fitting in and like providing value and where it doesn't. Um, I can speak for myself, and I know a lot of people on the call today. There's just like so much noise around AI. Um, there's a range of people like really leaning in and building like vibe coding on the weekends or trying out tools. And then there's people that are, very kind of waiting and seeing, can other people figure this out? And then I'll go copy that playbook. So, um, where do you see AI genuinely changing what people teams can do? Um,
Yeah,
not just like, we're beyond the, helping me write content or like email communications for my company. Um, what's like the next level and where we can, you know,
yeah.
provide incremental value.
Yeah, totally. And this is where the focusing on the problem that we're trying to solve becomes really important because before layering on what I'm about to say, which as everybody can probably guess is leading into agents, it's important to understand what is the work that's happening and then what's the process. And if we step away from is this an IT thing or an HR thing or a payroll thing, but more the process itself, then it becomes much easier to say, okay, how can we use AI to help this particular process? And so we're moving away from like to your point, Shelby, from only generation of content or from better answers to something that can really carry out the work itself. And that means that it could be anything that you can repeat. And if you can repeat it, if you can do it more than once, then rather than doing that task, build an agent instead. So whether that is verification letters, whether that is pointing people to the right policy, even whether that is running certain business processes, it's those kind of things where AI is starting to execute, of course, with approvals in place, whether that is in your existing systems or outside of it. And when that happens, let's take a leave of absence process. There's a bunch of processy stuff that has to be done. And then there's a lot of really important human work that has to be done. Or if we're talking about generating letters, that could be in the context of a promotion. There's updating systems and supervisory orgs and Workday as an example. That stuff is where AI can really help. But the human part of it, of having that conversation, of celebrating that person, of supporting them through an LOA, of welcoming them back in, all of those things will continue to stay human. Um, so I think it's less of a binary thing of AI is going to do this full use case and humans are going to do this full use case, but it's going to be more augmented, where AI does the fundamental core processy stuff, and then humans layer on top and focus and spend more of their time on those things that AI, whether it can do or not, our belief is that maybe it should not do that, and we keep it as a human moment.
hmm hmm Super interesting. One of the comments that came in from one of you all on the call today that really stuck with me was that like you need to have your processes laid out neatly before you layer AI on top of it. Or another way to say this is like if you have like bad data in your HRIS, you're just going to get bad data in, bad data out kind of thing. Um, I'm curious because, I work with earlier stage companies. Your clients tend to be larger, kind of 500 employees or more when things are more complicated, there's more process. how do you think about that? Like are there steps companies should take? Like, well, can you even like implement AI effectively if your processes are broken or your data is broken?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think the data and process quality is one element, and then there's also the AI readiness. So I think while you may be improving your processes and policies, there's also how do we upskill ourselves on AI, and how do we use Claude, how do we use ChatGPT, so that if and when you do want to then layer on an external tool, it means that not only are your processes and policies in a good place, but you're also able to then ask more informed questions and identify the gaps that you want to be able to fill. Um, when it comes to policies and processes, we've seen a range in reality. And I think if you were in 2025, we've had organizations that have spent their time cleaning up their knowledge base, getting more confident and comfortable over there. And then when they layered on an AI tool, or they've improved their policies in the HRIS and they've layered on an AI tool, and they've hit a really high deflection rate from the beginning, up to 70%. And in some use cases like open enrollment, up to 80%. This is kind of tool agnostic. This is down to the work that they've done. In 2026, however, it feels like the pulse in the market and when we speak with people, there's very little time because things are moving so quickly. And therefore, you can take 6 months to be able to then clean up your knowledge base to then layer on AI or clean up your processes to then layer on AI. But what AI tools allow you to do is to speed up that process. So we're now finding that people are using tools like ours to be able to interrogate the knowledge base, to be able to interrogate the processes, and then find what are the areas that require improvement. And what they're also doing is they're launching more iteratively, which means that they're now starting to get employee data around what employees are actually asking for. So as long as there is a baseline and then there's an acceptance that, yep, we know that there's going to be some stuff that is going to be potentially out of date, or it's not going to be quite correct, we're going to have a period that we will look at the core areas and make sure that at least that stuff is accurate and it doesn't give out false information. There's a testing period, and you can speed up that testing period with AI. But then we're also going to manage expectations with employees like, hey, we're going to take your feedback. And we know that you're asking all these questions about this particular topic. And therefore, given our constrained resources, we're going to focus on improving that piece of the puzzle because that's what you care about. So, yes, I would say don't layer on AI on knowledge or processes that you know are fully broken or needs a full rewrite. Um, but then use AI to be able to identify where those gaps are and start that way. And if you have a baseline, then layer it on and then do it iteratively. Change management we found with employees is actually much more delightful for them and easier for them rather than going big bang to say we're building it with you. We know there's certain gaps, but tell us what the issues are. And when they get that delight of, oh wow, now we can do this, or oh wow, now I can answer this particular thing, that actually helps to drive adoption and build that engagement and builds their AI literacy too. So I think we're now beyond that point where we have the luxury of waiting before we layer on an AI tool.
Hmm. And what I love about about what you said are kind of like how you're approaching implementation at companies is this product mindset thing where it's like we're going to pilot this. We're going to be iterative. We want your feedback. Like these are all very product like ways of working versus the traditional HR mindset is like we have to have this be perfect, perfect, perfect because if we screw up, benefits open enrollment or compensation review, which I care deeply about getting those things right, you maybe wouldn't start with those two.
Right.
Um, then but it kind of just like releases the pressure valve a little bit of getting it like 100% perfect um and just like starting and like getting your hands dirty with certain
Exactly.
workflows. Cool. Okay. Yeah, so well, speaking of getting started, that's where I wanted to go next. Um, I can share a little bit about what I'm experiencing with my clients, but then I'd love to hear from you as well. So again, I typically take the earlier stage perspective. I'm working with companies from like 100 to 500. Um, and although I'm like personally not the biggest fan of building, like it still makes me nervous, the vibe coding thing when we're thinking about HR processes. It does feel like a good place to start because my number one recommendation for everyone is just to try, just to like get your hands dirty and try. You know, a fun exercise for your next HR team offsite could be where you do a big whiteboard exercise where you write down like what are all the like the top like friction points in our process, or what are all of the like the top 20 common questions that we're getting from employees in our existing ticketing tool or in, in Slack or wherever they are today. Um, and thinking about how you could solve one of those, like with Copilot or with Claude, um, as a great way of starting to learn and just kind of better understanding your own internal workflows of what might need to get cleaned up before you would think about implementing a tool on top of that. Is just really having a deeper understanding of like your current state of things. Because often I find with HR teams, if you're not using like a ticketing tracking tool, it's like all this unseen work, like that's,
Mm.
every question you're getting asked or every laptop you're shipping, it's like hard to track all these things. Um, but I've seen good success with, teams doing a hack day or a hack week and just starting to pilot some of these things. And this can be employee questions, but I'm seeing this work well across lots of areas across HR and talent. So from sourcing, interview intelligence, performance review feedback, AI coaches, like there's a lot of I'm seeing a lot of success across HR and talent. Um, but employee questions just feels like a really great one, kind of low hanging fruit because it's every day, it's constant. That these questions are coming up and they're repeatable, like you said, and it's the type of work that's not adding a lot of like strategic value to the company.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I'd love to hear from you, kind of for those that did answer their question of what they're hoping to get out of this is like, where do I start?
Yeah.
What practical advice you have for them?
Yeah, I think there's kind of like a personal level, where do I start? And then there's the team, and then there's the organizational level of where do I start? And what we're seeing is that on a personal level, it is something that does require tinkering with. It is something that means extra time. Right now, on top of your day job, I promise you it will help in your day job eventually, but there's going to be a bit of a curve. And that does mean getting your own Claude subscription, or getting ChatGPT and then asking Claude or ChatGPT, what are the things that I can do with you? And maybe try it on something that is personal for you, whether that is booking a vacation or whether that is researching something for your next dinner, something that makes it really tangible, and keep that separate from the work accounts and what you're thinking about at work. Because I think that will also help to build that muscle so that when you do come to work, A, you've done something fun, and it can do amazing things for you. And B, it means that you have a more of an understanding of how to then apply those at work. And then Shelby, as you said, there's two things that we're seeing work really well for organizations and teams. One is to actually start internally. So you can't make that change as convincingly unless you've used it yourself and unless you've seen gains in your own team. So yes, agree, employee questions is one piece. But actually, what are some of the other areas that you are spending most of your time on? And is there something that you and your team can build internally to show that value and then to evangelize it elsewhere? Um, so I think that's that piece. Start internally, look at that process and start to build one thing, automate one thing only. Um, and that also then reduces kind of that surface area of and the potential blast radius of touching a bunch of people. You can only keep it to your own team. And then the other thing is when you're ready at the organizational level, is to get involved in those hackathons. Hackathons by far, from what we're seeing, is the biggest lever that people have to be able to upskill and build that AI fluency. And it generates so many great ideas. And yes, you're going to burn through a ton of tokens, but that's okay for now when you're using AI, because you can ask people to do AI courses and you can ask people to look at videos and even ask Claude. But until you actually get into it and try it for yourself, whether it's personally or at the hackathon organization level, that's really when the big unlock is. So if that's something that you can do, then I would recommend that. Um, and once you've already tried something internally, it also helps to drive that conversation of, okay, what are we doing as a whole? And we're seeing a lot of AI council spin up, for example, and being able to show that you've already done certain things within your team is what we've seen with our customers is a great way of being in that conversation and making sure that you are partnering really well with IT and the other teams as a true collaborator to be able to solve the end outcome, which is to improve the employee experience and improve effectiveness and productivity.
Hmm. Amazing. Okay. And for those that are like a little bit further in their journey, because I'm looking at one of the questions or one of the comments that one of you shared. You shared that the real work is moving people past chatbot interactions and into deeper iterative collaboration with IT. So, can you speak to kind of what chapter two of that process looks like for those that are like, yeah, yeah, we've done that and now we're ready for the next level?
Yeah. The next level I would say is to start to, and again, this will not require any vendor or bringing in any external party. I would assume that your organizations will have access to the chat GPTs and the Claudes of the world or Copilots of the world. And they do have certain agentic capabilities. So the next iteration is to uh, co-build and try and push the tools that you have to within your hands and within the business, push it as far as you can. Build some agentic workflows, because it's only then will you then be able to see where the gaps are and how far you can take it, and therefore you can make that decision of what you want to be able to keep in-house and what should be a core capability versus something that you might need to layer on top and buy externally. And what we're seeing is that at the moment, there is not such a great understanding as we'd like in IT teams of the deep HR problems that HR teams want to be able to solve. So be able to collaborate with the IT teams early and try and do something internally really helps to bring them along in the journey as well and actually show them like, hey, we're using as much of the resources, we're maximizing, and this is as far as we can take it. And then the decision is shared. Do we continue to go down this path? Can we maintain this? Or now that we've built up our understanding and our capability, now do we then together go out and look at a tool or a service that we can then bring in to solve this particular problem? But I think there's a lot that can be done internally, really, with the capabilities of those foundational models. And I would encourage people to try those agentic capabilities there.
Hmm. Yeah, you just said like IT doesn't always understand HR workflows or like the nuances of HR problems that we're solving. That sounds like kind of a possible area of where things can go awry or companies can get wrong. Can you elaborate on that and maybe bring up any other like pain points you're seeing?
Yeah, sure thing. So I'll give you a tangible example. One, looking at a lot of the data across our customers, one common use case is letter generation, verification letters, promotions, that type of thing, pay changes, bonuses. And we've had one piece of feedback from an IT team, and they're like, hey, we can do this. And the solution was, well, when someone asks about verification letters, we're going to tell them, here's a link, go over there, go into the HRIS and get it done over there. Whereas what really HR wanted was to reduce all that friction. And what the people team wanted was for employees to be able to request it or for someone else to be able to request it directly in Slack, for the letter to be generated by pulling information from the HRIS into Slack, that PDF then to be sent for approval, again in Slack, and then sent and emailed to the employee and then uploaded back into the HRIS. So that kind of level of nuance and detail and experience, IT was like, hey, they need a verification letter. Great. We have a knowledge base. We can put a link to the HRIS and they can go ahead and do it over there. Awesome. Problem solved. But that level of nuance and the experience that HR wanted to create to be able to take away all those steps just really wasn't there. And that required a discussion because otherwise they're just like, well, there's a bunch of these use cases and we can handle all of those things. So there's that piece, and then the other pieces before going into kind of build versus buy or those type of conversations. Again, having tried some of the AI tools upfront allows people to, from the HR perspective, to understand IT a little bit better. because IT, infosec, all those questions are going to come up of is this secure? Is it safe? How is it going to work? And it can be a little bit daunting. There's a lot of different lingo being thrown around, projects and skills and all these type of things. So spending a few weekends on that, candidly, is going to help to be able to have that conversation and be a little bit more confident about is it safe? How do we protect it? Where do we draw the line if you're thinking about doing internally versus externally? Can we keep it secure? Can we keep it private? And then the final piece of the puzzle is we're seeing that a lot of companies are struggling to drive ROI and get ROI from AI. So
Mm.
being really clear upfront that are we in an experimentation phase, and therefore we're going to have a lag on seeing that ROI from the tools that we're piloting or that we're trying, or setting up some leading indicators and being really clear about what we're trying to achieve with these things. It's a little bit easier for the type of use cases that we can support because you can clearly see a reduction in tickets. You can quantify that with time, and then what do I want to do with that time? But with some of the other use cases, which are equally interesting, that becomes a little bit difficult. And then 3 months down the line, you're going to get questions around, well, what is the ROI? What impact did it have on productivity? Whereas actually, that may not be enough time to be able to prove out that value. So being clear about that upfront, and building that investment case, which is no different from other tooling that may have been bought in the past, but there's a little bit more nuance. And I'd say in some ways it's a little tougher to do so. It's worth being aware of.
Hmm. Gosh. Thank you. I want to switch over to questions. The time is flying by. We could talk for hours. Madeline had a question in the Q&A, but if any others do, just pop them in and we'll get to as many as we can in our final few minutes. Madeline asked, do you have any advice for HR supporting AI and utilizing it while also facilitating the ethical conversations surrounding AI and its effects on the environment, mental health, and general fear regarding job replacement?
Yeah, Shelby, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this because I'm sure you're hearing a lot of this within companies too. What we're seeing is in the format of we're actually going to head to one of our customers on sites next week, and we're going to spend time with them on leveling up AI fluency. And as part of that, that doesn't only mean how do I use this tool in the best way, but also being quite open about, well, what does it mean about security? What does it actually mean in terms of impacting our environment? There are studies coming out that actually the more AI you use, you're actually using less of your brain, and you're becoming more dependent. So there is a mental health question. Absolutely, Madeline. It's a really important point. And actually, in the breakfast this morning that we had with a few HR leaders, they were saying we're not quite even there to measure things like ROI because there's this fear of not only replacement but fear of also looking stupid, and because people are talking about this certain lingo, and you always kind of feel behind. So creating that forum as part of, let's say, the AI fluency and the hackathon, that forum is turning out to be quite a common way. So it's not just like we're going to go and build, but we're going to spend this session. We're going to bring in people from outside, potentially people that you trust, on how they're solving those things. Has been quite a good way of opening up that conversation. Because I think it's going to be a really hard thing to solve if it's just the HR team trying to do it themselves. But involving more people and creating that forum is the way to go. It seems to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I tend to be a glass half full kind of gal. And so, I view this as a huge like career game changer for HR teams. Like if it can be so scary and fearful, but I do not view it as job replacement. I think also I've just been in this game a long time. Like I've been working in startups for 20 years, like I said, and way back years before AI was a thing, I had to prove a business case for any hire that I wanted to add on my team that we had like outsourced, automated, streamlined a process. We had like this really strong business case that we needed a human to solve a problem that we couldn't solve with technology or through some other process improvement way. And so I've been forced to think like this for much, much longer than, this current AI era. Um, and so it anyway, but I view it as a big positive. if we can get past kind of that hurdle. Um, so Connie asked a great question. We talked a lot about hack days and hack weeks. Connie, I have some resources. There's some teams that have open sourced, like we did a
Mm.
hackathon and this is exactly how we structured it. Um, if you want to follow up with me. But Jeet, any other like tactical advice for teams looking to plan their hackathon?
Yeah, I think it's the secret is all in the prep. In reality, as you might expect with these things. So, um, that would mean actually looking at your workflows before you arrive at the hackathon, and almost create a long wish list of what are some of the problems that you want to be able to solve. It also means prior to the hackathon that you might actually want to do a couple of training sessions on how to even use these tools that you're asking people to use. And then during the hackathon, give people the option of choosing certain workflows that ideally map to business outcomes, with the idea that you're allowing them space to fail and try, and it's a throwaway piece of work. But allowing folks who want to have a more advanced session to also do that, because people are going to be at different levels. And so creating kind of that opportunity for people to express a little bit more, maybe they're more ahead, while making space for those folks who are maybe feeling a little bit uncomfortable, they're unsure. That's going to be important. Where we've seen it doesn't quite work is when everyone's trying to do everything at the same time in the same room together. That tends to create a little bit of anxiety and exacerbates that feeling of, well, I'm kind of behind based on what other people are doing here.
Yeah. Great. Okay, well, I'm going to wrap us up today. But if you have questions for me or for Jeet, I'm going to be sending a follow-up email to everyone. So you'll have our contact details. We also are going to be sharing the recording of today. But we're both available if you want to talk shop on this a little bit more, talk about your specific company challenges. I think, what came clear to me, what seems to be coming to the top today is starting with one workflow, not getting overwhelmed by trying to solve all the world's problems, um, but starting with one workflow, planning a hack day, planning a half day offsite for your team where you start talking about these things, playing around with the tools, and embracing that product mindset. Um, I just, again, I'm a glass half full gal, but I think that we've never had these types of tools available to us on HR teams. So it's a wonderful, we now, there's the opportunity and there's the tooling, and it's just finding the right combination for your company. Um, Jeet, any final thoughts from you?
Well, I think you summed it up really well, Shelby. I mean, we keep hearing like, I don't think anybody really signed up to generate and click buttons and create verification letters or update systems. Like that's just part of the job that we have to do. So it's a really awesome opportunity for us to think about what those are and see where we can partner with other departments within the business to be able to remove that work so that we can then focus on things that we did take the job for. And that's the piece that's really exciting. It just frees up capacity for us to do what we were brought in to do, and reach that impact much faster. So I'm excited to see where this goes.
Amazing. All right. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining today. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.